From 2007 to 2009, in Japan, middle-aged single men died in mysterious ways. Initially, the police did not prioritize these cases, but in one instance, the secret of the girl referred to by the media as the Black Widow was uncovered. Kanae Kijima was born on November 27, 1944, in Nakoshitsu, Japan. She was the eldest of 4 siblings. While the names of her relatives were not published, it is known that her father was a notary and her mother a piano teacher. Coming from wealthy families, Kanae's parents tried to provide their children with favorable conditions and everything they needed as adults. As the firstborn, Kanae received special attention and was inspired by her mother's musical passion to develop her piano-playing skills. She spent endless hours refining her technique, and quickly her talents became apparent, performing solo concerts on various stages and participating in prestigious competitions. However, cooking was not Kanae's only interest. Already at the age of 9, her mother noted this skill as a good sign for her future ability to raise a worthy generation. Her father enforced strict discipline at home, including restricting access to certain resources, which Kanae found unbearable and soon gave in to her instincts. In high school, she learned her father had $21,000 in cash at home, which she took and spent on clothes and designer handbags. When her father learned of this, he punished Kanae by cutting her allowance. But contrary to his wishes, she did not regret her actions and instead longed for even more money. This led her back into the fascinating world of dating, where she began offering her companionship to older men for generous financial rewards. In this context, she entered into a relationship with a man in his 40s, whose identity remains unknown. Under his influence, Kanae stole a classmate's bank card, and together they withdrew about $80,000. When authorities discovered them, they were arrested and brought to trial. However, since Kanae was still a minor, she received a probation sentence. Nevertheless, she maintained excellent academic performance and graduated from high school. Afterwards, she decided to move to Tokyo and enroll in the Faculty of Economics. However, Kanae almost immediately lost interest in her studies and dropped out of college. Nevertheless, the city enchanted her, and she did not want to leave. To make ends meet, Kanae took on several temporary and unstable jobs, one of which was as a waitress in a fast food restaurant. Long working hours, difficult conditions, and low wages did not allow her to rest. She constantly worried about how to pay the rent for the apartment she hated because it was very modest. It was only a matter of time before Kanae adopted a new reprehensible habit. She entered stores and stole cosmetics, books, and even money by pretending to be an ordinary customer. Although she was caught several times, she managed to avoid arrest. These random thefts were not enough to sustain the lifestyle she aspired to, so Kanae quit her job and decided to go to an escort club. These establishments offered services ranging from conversations and social gatherings to more intimate interactions. Clients had the opportunity to choose a woman based on the information provided. However, at a height of 1.5 meters and weighing 105 kilograms, Kanae did not meet generally accepted beauty standards, so she initially did not attract much attention. But everything changed when she met the pimp Takuchi, who became her mentor. He taught her how to satisfy a man, inspired her to develop a complete marketing strategy, and advised her to look for middle-aged or older men with low self-esteem who were not inclined to desire the women they really wanted. Kanae recognized the value of her own abilities and strengths and began to develop emotional relationships with her partners. She discovered that kindness and attention not only attracted attention, but also appreciation. Kanae became an expert in the art of seduction, capable of reading people and understanding what they wanted. She discovered a new, unprecedented strength in herself. At that time, Kanae adopted the pseudonym Sakura and invented the story that her father was a professor at the prestigious University of Tokyo, the most elite educational institution in the country. On other occasions, she introduced herself as a nurse, therapist, or famous chef. All these fictional stories created a captivating image. One of the clients who fell into this new role was Sadao Fukuyama. They met in February 2001 in a bar, and their communication was so intense that they became a couple within 2 weeks. But not only that, The man, who had previously distinguished himself by frugality and precision in spending, made the mistake of trusting her, which Kanae shamelessly exploited. First, she invented a story about the death of her parents in a plane crash, and said that she could not pay the tuition fees at the music school in Boston, where she allegedly studied. Sadao promised to cover all costs, and in return, she would come to visit him once a month from the USA. The man looked forward to these visits, elegantly dressed and deeply in love with the woman he considered his bride, while Kanae used the opportunity to deplete most of his savings. After a few years, Kanae ended the relationship when she realized that she had exhausted all of Sadao's financial resources. She was cunning and manipulative, leaving no traces that could lead to her discovery. When Sadao suspected he had been deceived and tried to report her, the evidence was not sufficient to file a lawsuit. A few months later, in August 2007, Sadao came home late from work. Worried, one of his colleagues went to his house and found him dead in the shower. When the news became known, Kanae transferred $50,000 from her ex-fiancé's funds to her bank account. Since the police could not determine the cause of death, the case was classified as a domestic accident. In 2008, Kanae became interested in the development of the internet in Japan. After analyzing the obvious advantages of the virtual world, she decided to change her strategy. Under the pseudonym Sakura, she created a profile on major local social networks dedicated to dating. In her description, she made it clear that she was seeking a serious relationship to start a family. Kanae perfectly understood the characteristics and needs of her potential victims. She knew they were mostly men with high work and social stress, high income, and a void in their souls. Moreover, her strategy was to adapt to the situation and change according to the preferences of her interlocutors. In this sense, Kanae sometimes appeared as a young woman seeking true love, a talented pianist, or even as a pet store owner with a passion for cooking. It didn't take long for her to become a virtual celebrity. Her profile mainly attracted mature and older men who wanted to add some dignity to their age. One of those who fell in love with Kanae was Takao Terada, a 53-year-old systems engineer who lived in a suburb of Tokyo. Since his daily routine consisted of commuting from work to home, the only people he had contact with were his mother and his sister. In February 2008, Takao decided to meet someone online. 2 months later, Kanae sent him an invitation for a meeting, expressing her hope for a future marriage. But first, she asked for financial help to cover some expenses. At the same time, Kanae posed as a nurse and caregiver, responding to ads posted by Kenzo, an 80-year-old man living in Noda City in Chiba Prefecture. Despite his low income, Kenzo came from a distinguished family. His father was a famous artist from whom he had inherited valuable paintings. Additionally, Kenzo suffered from several health issues. During their first conversation, Kanae sent him a carefully retouched photo where part of her body was barely visible. Kenzo was impressed and hired her as a nurse and cook. Not only did Kanae prepare a special dish for him, but she was also ready to do anything to please him. In this way, she gained his devotion and gratitude. A month later, Kanae asked Ken for a loan, saying the money was needed to finance her university studies. Without hesitation, he gave her all his savings. Meanwhile, Kanae manipulated Takao's feelings, who unreservedly told his mother about the exceptional treatment he was receiving from his bride-to-be and his plans to marry. Kenzo was so filled with trust in Kanae that he gave her a copy of his house keys. However, the man soon fell into a coma and had to be hospitalized. In his absence, Kanae entered and left his house, taking his paintings, which she then sold at high prices. Additionally, she simultaneously deceived other men, whose names were not disclosed in all cases, but it is known that their ages ranged between 40 and 50. While Takao dreamed of living together, Kanae already had a plan that was entirely different. After buying electric stoves online, she agreed to meet him at her house and brought sleeping pills with her. After preparing dinner for both, she crushed some pills and mixed them into the food. A few minutes later, Takao lost consciousness. Kanae dragged him into the room, closed all doors and windows, set up the stove, laid charcoal on it, and turned it on before leaving. She then transferred $121,000 from Takao's account to her own bank account, also taking the house keys and the computer. Days later, on February 4, 2009, Takao's boss came to his house to check if everything was all right. Receiving no response, he contacted local authorities, and Takao's lifeless body was discovered. After analyzing his call history, investigators found that his contact list contained only his mother, his sister, and Kanae under the pseudonym Sakura. When officers contacted Kanae, she reported that Takao was emotionally unstable and probably died after suffering the distress of her rejecting his marriage proposal. Given the absence of signs of violence, this version seemed plausible to the police, and the investigations were therefore not pursued further. After he awoke from the coma, Kenzo returned home. On the evening of May 15, 2009, Kanae visited him as usual. She sat with him and began preparing dinner, but this time added a special ingredient to his dishes: tranquilizers. As soon as Kenzo fell asleep, she locked him in the room and repeated the procedure with the plates, as she had done with her other victims. Before leaving, she accessed Kenzo's bank account and transferred $13,000 to her own. However, this time one of the electric stoves caught fire, and the flames engulfed the entire house. Kenzo died instantly from fatal burns. A subsequent autopsy revealed that the man had consumed an unusually large number of sleeping pills, although it also turned out that he had never previously taken such medications. The authorities recognized his death as an accident. Meanwhile, Kanae continued to block and search online for more victims. In July 2009, Isayuki Yude stumbled upon her account and sent her a message. Unable to resist her charm, Isayuki, a 41-year-old single man, in addition to his salary, received income from renting family properties. Moreover, he was very close to his mother who lived in Kijima. During their first conversation, Kanae introduced herself as Dr. Randine, seeking a man who could financially support her and whom she could marry. Isayuki was fascinated by her words and invited the girl to a meeting in 2 days. Over the days, Kanae made it clear to Isayuki that their relationship was getting stronger. They announced their engagement and began making wedding plans. Then, she persuaded him to transfer $30,000 under the marriage contract to finance her studies. August 5, 2009, was marked as a special date in the couple's calendar. For this occasion, they planned a trip to Kijima, where they intended to relax for 3 days. At the same time, the main reason for Isayuki's excitement was the meeting of the two most important women in his life, his mother and Kanae. He was so excited that he wanted to share his happiness on his own blog and even announced his upcoming wedding. To honor the holiday, Kanae prepared a lavish dinner, and unbeknownst to Isayuki, she crushed various substances and sprinkled them into his food. At the end of the evening, they drove a rental car to their destination. Upon arriving in Fujimi City, the couple parked in the parking lot. At that moment, the pills took effect on Isayuki, and he fell into a deep sleep. Then Kanae turned on the electric stove, ignited the charcoal, and left the man locked in the car. Everything was as usual, but this time she made a mistake. Kanae forgot to leave her keys in the car. At that point, the only surveillance camera recorded her leaving the parking lot. Kanae then stole $35,000 from Isayuki's account. When the police discovered the body, they initially assumed that the man had died by himself. However, when it turned out that the car keys were nowhere to be found, this caused confusion. Almost immediately, this feeling turned into suspicion, since no note was found that could justify Isayuki's actions. Moreover, there were no traces of charcoal on his hands or clothes. According to Isayuki's mother, her son had no reason to make such a drastic decision. In fact, he was more than satisfied with what life had to offer. The investigators, after studying his blog, confirmed this. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death was carbon monoxide poisoning, but also uncovered another detail: traces of tranquilizers in his body. In summary, the police concluded that, along with Isayuki, 3 bachelors had died under similar circumstances that year, raising concerns and suspicions. When the police gained access to the recordings, Kanae was released, but the lack of additional cameras did not allow for the discovery of crucial evidence. However, from that moment on, all investigations focused on her. When Isayuki's computer was analyzed, it was revealed how they had met. When the investigators approached Kanae, she stated that she had met Isayuki the day before and had left him alone. She also suggested that the man might have done something to end his life after her departure. Despite Kanae's statement, the police decided to initiate a thorough investigation and gather information on all deaths and fraud cases related to her. On September 15, 2009, Kanae came into contact again on a virtual platform with another 43-year-old man, whose name remains unknown. In this case, the girl posed as an American student studying culinary arts in Japan. She also led me to believe that she was facing family troubles and financial difficulties funding her studies. Finally, Kanae told him that she was ready to give up everything, including her studies, to be with him. The next day, her lover transferred $17,000 to her, and a few days later, Kanae moved into his house. At the same time, she purchased 2 electric stoves and then proceeded to cut all the fire alarm cables in the house. Kanae's plan was foiled when, on September 23, 2009, the groom's sister came to stay at the residence for a few days. The sister immediately became suspicious of her new sister-in-law and tried to convince her brother not to continue the relationship. It got even worse when he told her about the strange circumstances of their acquaintance and the money he had lent to Kanae. Then, the sister decided to follow her intuition and told the police everything she knew. On September 25th, the police arrived at the residence and arrested Kanae on fraud charges. When they searched the room, they discovered that all the alarm devices were turned off, indicating that the girl was about to carry out a typical procedure. During the search, various medications were found, including several classes of drugs that cause drowsiness and sedation. Moreover, the investigators found all her online purchases of cooking appliances on her computer. These pieces of evidence established a direct connection to earlier cases, thus making her the prime suspect in Isayuki's death. In January 2010, as the investigation into the unusual deaths continued, Kanae was charged with multiple counts of fraud. A month later, she was also charged with murder, specifically for Takao's death, although an autopsy had never been conducted in this case. The charges were based on the absence of clear evidence of the cause of death, which led to an unusual situation during the trial. She declared her innocence and claimed that the deaths of these men were accidents or personal decisions by the men themselves, which matched her defense strategy aiming for an acquittal due to a lack of concrete evidence. In the absence of such direct evidence and lacking witnesses or confessions, the prosecution emphasized the significance of circumstantial evidence, such as her presence with the victims before their deaths, the similarity of the causes of death, and the fact that all tests continued showed that the men had consumed a drug also found on Kanae. The prosecution also stated that the girl had received large loans from 3 of her victims and had killed them to avoid repaying the money. Prosecutors argued that Kanae had poisoned the 3 victims with charcoal and electric stoves to confuse the authorities, as death by poisoning is a common method of murder in Japan. Finally, on April 13, 2012, a jury found Kanae guilty of murdering 3 men, and the court subsequently sentenced her to death. Kanae was on death row and continued to write in her blog, discussing her experiences, and the fame she gained even brought her financial support from some fans who were willing to improve her living conditions. Incredibly, one of the fans who financially supported her eventually married Kanae. This happened in 2016, and according to available data, the man was about 60 years old. After an accident, however, he became disabled, which made further financial support impossible, and then Kanae divorced him. Kanae also used her time behind bars to write memoirs, which were then published weekly in a women's magazine. At the same time, she published an autobiographical novel titled Praise. 100 days after the divorce, Kanae remarried, this time to a real estate company. But after a few months, they divorced in 2018. Kanae decided to marry again, this time The chosen one was a 40-year-old man who worked at the publishing house responsible for publishing her book. As she awaited her execution, Kanae continued to lead an active, controversial life that drew both admiration and condemnation. Marcos was fortunate to be born into a very wealthy family that owned a food production company. When he became an adult, he took over the reins of the family business, significantly increasing its revenue. Despite this success, he could never truly enjoy his wealth. This story took place in Brazil in 2013, the largest and one of the most populous countries in Latin America. Home to over 200 million people, Brazil features wild tribes along the Amazon River who have never had contact with civilization. The Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro is not only a symbol of Brazil, but of the entire continent. This majestic 38-meter-tall statue is considered one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Brazil is known as the land of football, popular TV shows, the famous carnival, and has been a major source of coffee production for over 100 years. At that time, 48-year-old Marcos Matsunaga lived there with his 38-year-old wife, Alice. They had a 10-year age difference but seemed very happy together. They were also extremely wealthy. Marcos was a multimillionaire aspiring to become a billionaire. He owned a food company named Yuki, which produced items like popcorn and chips. This company had been passed down through several generations of his family. It was founded by his grandfather, Joshizo Kitano, in whose honor the successful company was named. Marcos later planned to sell the company for $1 billion, but he never achieved billionaire status. Before meeting Alice, Marcos had been married once and ended that relationship to dive into a whirlwind of passion and recklessness with his new love. However, it cannot be said for certain that Alice contributed to his previous marital issues. Marcos had a long history of cheating on his wife with various women, and Alice was just one of them, until he realized he had fallen in love. He met his new girlfriend online on an escort service website. Throughout his life, Marcos had never attracted much attention from women. He was overweight, had an inconspicuous appearance, and a difficult personality. However, he always sought validation of his importance, so he secretly hired escorts to satisfy his needs. That's where he met Alice, who later became his second wife. Alice came from a very dysfunctional family. They lived in extreme poverty, and as a child, she was often abused by her stepfather. This led to a very troubled childhood. Due to the unsafe area her family lived in, she constantly found herself in trouble. As Alice grew older, she managed to escape this dangerous place and trained to become a nurse. She had always been a caring, loving, and generous person, so when it came time to choose a profession, she decided to dedicate herself to helping sick people. However, all the warmth that had accumulated in her heart since childhood partially turned against her, leading her to be unable to continue caring for the sick. Alice realized that she became too attached to her patients, so much so that when their conditions worsened or when they died, she felt the loss as if they were her own family, causing her unimaginable pain. This job became a constant source of stress for Alice. She could not handle the emotional side of it and remembered how the death of one of her patients completely changed her worldview. Alice recognized that she could not withstand such psychological stress for long and could not continue working as a nurse. She had to choose a new career path and decided to study law. To support herself and finance her education, she began offering support services on the side. Initially, she enjoyed going out with men professionally, but only the intimate aspect related to the services made her nervous. It was in this way that she met the millionaire Marcos. The Matsunaga family was one of the richest families in Brazil at the time, and the food company Yuki was one of the leading companies in its field. A large part of this progress within the company occurred when Marcos took over the reins. He achieved much more than his father and grandfather had, expanding his business to a global level. Since childhood, Marcos was accustomed to having the best of everything, no matter how much money and success he had. The girls were almost uninterested in the guy. Some people thought he was not very attractive in the conventional sense, and possibly his personality traits had an influence. Nevertheless, even millions did not make him a suitable bachelor, and many attractive women with whom Marcos tried to establish relationships somehow disappeared very quickly from his life, and even money could not keep them. However, one day, when he was not yet the owner of the company, as it was managed by Marcos's father, a young woman appeared on the horizon. She was the first to show genuine interest in him, and the future millionaire got married. However, he did this not out of great love but out of desperation. When the man entered this marriage, he quickly realized that he was unhappy. Marcos was too hasty and made the wrong decision. Instead of getting a divorce and finding someone who really suited him, Matsunaga simply began cheating on his wife by hiring escort girls. Ultimately, Alice turned his head so much that he quickly filed for divorce and remarried. Of course, he had no intention of telling his family and friends that he had met the girl through an escort service and that he had paid her multiple times for intimate services. Marcos wanted to present this acquaintance as a natural meeting somewhere in a cafe and hoped that the truth would never come to light. The family asked no questions. In the end, they found out everything themselves. Alice was a pretty beautiful woman, and especially 10 years younger than Marcos. Most likely, she used her attractiveness and decided to marry a rich and not very attractive millionaire to get to his money. Friends tried to open Matsunaga's eyes to his girlfriend's motives, but he refused to believe that Alice had only selfish interests and tried to quickly put a ring on her finger as if he was afraid she would run away. Marcos hastily brought the woman into his huge villa full of luxurious things. Apart from Alice, Marcos was mainly obsessed with wine. He even built huge cellars under his house where he stored a selection of fine drinks worth a total of $2 million. Moreover, there was a secret room in the house, hidden in the wall and completely filled with weapons and ammunition worth $500,000. Matsunaga's house was full of excesses and some really eccentric things, but among them were also really expensive artworks. Marcos was excessively wasteful when buying certain things. The couple's life started very well. The newlyweds traveled everywhere, learned about other cultures together, and enjoyed good wine and food. Shortly after the wedding, the couple decided they wanted to have a child together, so Alice stopped taking the pill and looked forward to becoming pregnant. But it wasn't that simple. It turned out that Marcos's new wife was among the women who could not conceive a child in the usual way. No matter how much they tried, nothing worked. Fortunately, the Matsunaga family had enough money to undergo several medical procedures, and eventually, Alice became pregnant. 9 months later, she had a beautiful baby. The young parents were incredibly happy that their wish had come true, and the huge house was filled with baby items, infant food, and toys. After some time, even Marcus's friends admitted that they had been wrong when they considered Alice a gold digger. The couple continued to live together. They had a daughter in common and had a lot in common. Both enjoyed shooting and hunting animals. The couple would go into the woods and shoot wild boars, then skin them and slaughter the carcass. They also had a snake as a pet, which lived in a special terrarium. Marcos could not believe he had met a woman who wanted to go hunting with him and allowed him to have a snake at home. For the first time, a man was not only appreciated for his money, but also for his little quirks. The Matsunaga family was happy. At the end of May 2001, the millionaire food magnate Marcos Matsunaga disappeared. He vanished completely. All of this happened just as he was closing a billion-dollar deal to sell the family business, Yoki. After his wife Alice reported him as missing, the police initially assumed it was probably a kidnapping. Everyone knew his family was among the wealthiest in all of Brazil, and that Marcos was closing this billion-dollar deal. Surely there were many people who wanted to harm Matsunaga, or simply remove him from the way to prevent this big deal from being completed. The police began questioning all acquaintances and friends in Marcos's life. Did he have enemies or similar rivals, or could he wish that someone suddenly disappear? But no one could recall that Marcos had argued with anyone about business. Acquaintances could not name a single person who would be interested in the failure of this business deal. Everything seemed to be going well. The police spoke with the wife of the missing man. They wanted to get a picture of his daily routine, his schedule for the day of his disappearance, and the woman told the investigators that Marcos had told her the night he disappeared that he would meet one of the buyers who would pay $1 billion for Yuki. He warned that the deal could take a long time and asked her not to wait for him in the evening, but to go to bed. The next morning, he also had a very early appointment and warned his wife that he would most likely stay overnight at the office. When Alice woke up the next day, Marcos was still not at home. Since then, she had neither seen him nor heard anything from him. Therefore, the police were initially convinced of the ransom theory. They waited for the criminals to call with demands. Time passed. Everyone waited for news or calls regarding the ransom, but nothing came. No one demanded money or threatened to kill the millionaire. The investigators did everything they could to find Marcos himself, but there were no traces or clues as to which direction to look. A few days after the investigation began, Alice met at the house of Marcos's parents. She had something to tell them that she had not told the police. It turned out that Marcos had left her. He packed his bag and left voluntarily. He began cheating on her with other women. The pattern of marriage with the first wife repeated itself, and it was not the first time Alice had caught him. The man was humiliated and begged for forgiveness. The woman was pregnant with their daughter at this time and did not want the child to lose its father. Moreover, they had been waiting for the baby's birth for so long. At first, she was naturally very offended and so depressed by the grief that she wanted to leave him. But just at that moment, she found out about her pregnancy. This changed her attitude. However, it was clear that Marcos had not left this behind. In the first 2 years of his daughter's life, he behaved wonderfully, but a few months before his disappearance, he began cheating again. In May, Alice left town for about a week to visit her grandmother, who had become very ill. Even then, the woman began to think that her husband would take advantage of her absence. That's why Alice decided to hire a private detective to follow her husband while she was not around. Everything Marcos did was recorded and filmed. In the end, her premonition was not deceived. Every night that Alice was not at home, her husband cheated on her. It was again an escort named Natalia, whom he found on the same website as Alice. The husband met her, brought her home, and invited her to dine in the same restaurants he visited with his wife. It was seen by the owners and chefs who knew the Matsunaga family. It looked as if he was deliberately disregarding his wife. The private detective managed to gather evidence of Marcus's actions, and he handed everything over to Alice. It was a whole stack of diaries about where they went and what they did together, as well as video footage. Alice even showed her parents a video of Marcus with another woman before he disappeared. She presented him with this evidence and said she knew about the betrayal. Only this time, the man did not try to apologize and beg for forgiveness as he had done the first time. He simply packed his bag and left her. It turned out that no one had kidnapped him. He just walked away. Although the parents were devastated by the news of their son's infidelity, they sided with Alice because they felt sorry for the woman and her granddaughter. The Matsunaga family promised to ensure that mother and daughter would lack for nothing. The police were informed that no kidnapping had taken place, so it made no sense to expect ransom demands. A day or two after the investigators dropped their story, Marcos's brother received an email telling him that he was fine and not to worry. The man also asked Alice to tell him that he regretted his actions. That's all he said. He did not say where he was or what he was doing, just that he was safe and very sorry. The police confirmed that no real crime had occurred. Marcos simply ran away by cheating on his wife with another woman, and the investigation was closed. However, less than a week later, 30 kilometers from Marcos's house, something terrible was discovered. The dismembered body of a man was found. It was the body of Marcos Matsunaga, divided into several parts and scattered across fields and forests. Half of the parts were packed in ordinary blue garbage bags. The other body parts simply lay in the grass. Moreover, a blue bag was found containing his clothes, jeans, and a polo shirt. These were the items that helped identify the remains as Marcos Matsunaga, as all the clothes in this bag were designer clothes and accordingly very expensive. This entire outfit cost much more than most people in the area earned in a month. Lastly, the man's head was found. Dental records confirmed that this was the body of the missing millionaire. The cause of death was also announced. A single gunshot wound to the head took Marcos's life. When all the body parts were brought in for examination in the morgue, the medical examiner noted that all the cuts had been made very carefully and competently at the right places. It must have been done by someone who had a good understanding of human anatomy and biology. The criminal clearly knew where the main bones were and how he could more comfortably dismember the body. Therefore, he had certain medical knowledge. Aside from this assumption, however, they had no leads or suspects. They had no idea where to start their investigation. So the investigators decided to go to Marcos's house first, where he had recently lived with his wife and daughter, and take all the surveillance footage there. Since the last person who saw him alive was his wife, the police planned to track his movements from the starting point, see what he was wearing, how he looked that day, and whether he behaved strangely. They obtained the videos and began reviewing them, noting the footage where Matsunaga was recorded. The man was wearing the same clothes found next to the body, a shirt, and branded jeans. The first entry was made on May 19, 2001, exactly the day Alice returned from her trip. So she had not yet met with the private detective or seen incriminating recordings of her husband. Marcos picked her up from the airport and brought her and their daughter home. The woman was in no rush to cause a scandal and expose the cheating in the car, on the way home, or in the elevator. They appeared like an ordinary, loving family in the recordings. Later that evening, it is again seen on the recordings how Marcos goes downstairs to get a pizza. The man looked somewhat nervous and tired. After he picked up the pizza, he returned to the building, but never left the apartment again. However, the next morning, Alice Matsunaga was filmed by the camera, a woman coming out of their apartment with 3 very heavy suitcases, which she barely managed to carry into the elevator. Then she left the building, got into the car, and somehow loaded her luggage. A few hours later, she returned without the heavy load. What was in those suitcases and where did she take them? It was still unclear what happened in the apartment, but the police were convinced that Alice Matsunaga was somehow responsible for her own husband's death. She was the only adult in that apartment with him, and then he disappeared without leaving the house. Could she have killed him, then dismembered the body and taken it out in suitcases? There were many questions, which is why the officers almost immediately arrested Alice, although she tried to deny everything. But it was impossible to deny the recordings in one way or another. She was accused of a crime. After the investigators exhausted their questioning, she finally admitted to having taken her husband's life and told the police the sequence of events that led to this brutal crime. She said they had argued for several hours throughout the night. Then, late in the evening, they ordered pizza for takeaway because neither of them wanted to cook. Before the pizza was delivered, Marcos began to behave strangely. Someone called him, and he went to another room to talk on the phone. Then he returned to Alice and said that his father had called that evening and asked for help with something. After dinner, the husband got ready to go to his parents' house. Alice immediately realized this was a lie. She knew her husband intended to leave her that first night to return to his mistress. From the messages of the private detective, the woman knew that Marcos and Natalia had met every evening of the past week, and even after 7 days of separation, he was ready to leave her alone in the apartment for a date. Naturally, Alice was furious. Her original plan was to stay calm and try to discuss the situation quietly and solve the problem in a more balanced way. However, when she heard that her husband was supposedly going to visit his father, her patience burst like a soap bubble. She could no longer hold back and began to scream at him. Again, Marcos did not try to ask for her forgiveness or make up for his guilt towards her in any way. On the contrary, he became terribly angry and said she was crazy and had made everything up. He hurled hurtful words at her, saying Alice was paranoid, an insecure and unstable woman. The most hurtful thing was that he said she was an inappropriate mother for their daughter. For her, this was nothing new, as Marcos had often hinted at this during their relationship. However, it exceeded her strength to listen to unpleasant things about herself when she caught her husband cheating. Outwardly, the relationship in the Matsunaga family seemed very happy, but inside it was quite abusive. Marcos had always been very possessive and did not allow his wife to have male friends. Whenever she went to law school, he called her about every half hour to find out where she was and whether there were men nearby. She even had to ask her male classmates not to talk in the background while she was on the phone with her husband. Throughout their entire family life, Marcos humiliated Alice and made her feel worthless and inferior. He constantly reminded her of her work in the escort service, saying that he had pulled her out of the dirt, after which he usually sarcastically wished her luck finding another man who would appreciate her past work. At the same time, he referred to it as something suitable only for providing intimate services. The woman desperately wanted to change her life by contacting Marcos one day, but the man was not okay with that. That night, Marcos repeated those cruel words, and then at some point during this confrontation, he hit his wife in the face, which was the first time he had hit her. Before, their arguments had never gone beyond verbal insults. But for Alice, this slap in the face was a turning point. Now she knew what her husband was capable of, and she was not willing to tolerate his escapades. The woman immediately decided to divorce, which she informed her husband about. In response, Marcos calmly said that she could leave him, but she could not take their daughter with her. He promised to ensure that she would not get custody of the child. He threatened to tell everyone that Alice was not capable of taking care of the baby, and that she would be put in a psychiatric clinic if she tried to take her daughter away. According to Alice, throughout their entire family life, Marcos threatened and manipulated her. She could not remember the details of that night. It was an emotional blur. Here, she had a weapon in her hand, and her husband was coming right at her, urging her, "Shoot me!" She pointed the gun at Marcos and pulled the trigger without realizing it. One shot was enough to make the man fall dead. There was no turning back now. Panic began. Alice felt the weight of her actions. She knew she would spend the rest of her life in prison. And she also knew that her daughter would now have not only no father, but also no mother. For her child's sake, she tried to hide the crime. Alice knew no other way to get rid of the body than to dismember it and take it out of the house. She grabbed the hunting knives with which Marcos and she usually dismembered wild boar carcasses. It was clear that she was good with cold steel, and it turned out that it was Marcos who had taught her how to skin animals and cut bones, and he had bought her the gun that became the murder weapon. Alice Matsunaga spent the next 2 weeks pretending to be a grieving wife, but in reality, she was afraid that not the whole truth about her deed would come to light. Her humanity was instantly blocked by a terrible image of how a woman spent several hours there and cut her husband's body into pieces. Many people believe that Alice made up all these harassments and insults because Marcos could not refute them now. This case is very controversial. After reviewing all the evidence, the prosecution concluded that, judging by the trajectory of the bullet, the man was either sitting or lying down, meaning that Alice had indeed planned in advance to get rid of her annoying millionaire husband. It is also worth considering that their daughter was in the next room during the act. The autopsy also showed that Marcos had blood in his lungs, meaning that the man was still alive when Alice dismembered him. The woman pretended not to understand how Marcos could still be alive after a gunshot wound to the head. Ultimately, Alice Matsunaga was found guilty of her husband's death and cover-up. She was sentenced to 19 years and 11 months in prison and is scheduled to be released in 2025. Currently, the child is being raised by Marcos's parents and the girl is doing well. On November 12, 2021, 19-year-old Ashley Wadsworth from Canada traveled to the United Kingdom to visit her boyfriend, whom she had met online. Ashley was incredibly happy to finally meet him after many years of online communication. However, no one could have imagined that this joyful reunion would turn into a tragedy. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002 in Vernon, British Columbia, Canada. She was the daughter of Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Gendron, and had an older sister named Haley. The Wadsworth family was large and closely knit, consisting of more than 50 members, including various cousins, uncles, and aunts, all living in the same community. Ashley was cheerful, sociable, and energetic, which made her popular and well-liked. She enjoyed outdoor activities such as swimming, horse riding, and skiing. Ashley also liked playing tennis and the clarinet. Additionally, she was very active on social networks, constantly sharing jokes and photos. Ashley met Jack Ken through social networks. They first connected in 2015 when she was 12, and he was 15. It is known that Jack was born on January 9, 1999, and his mother, Tracy Dalton, was married to a man named Ricky. Jack's relationship with his father, who died in 2019, was reportedly strained. As for the rest of his family, he did not communicate with his brother Jordan, but he did maintain contact with his sister Nadia. Besides his mother and sister, Jack did not have many close people in his life and preferred to interact only through the internet and video games. According to some acquaintances, Jack often got into trouble at school, though they did not remember him as a cheerful, charming, or loud child. They also spoke of his darker side, which emerged when he was angry, displaying aggression towards himself and others. It was Ashley's friend who introduced the two young people through social networks. Like many other teenagers, Ashley found it normal to interact with strangers through various platforms and form virtual friendships. It didn't matter whether they shared common interests or simply felt attracted to each other. Jack and Ashley quickly became virtual friends. At this point, she did not have a smartphone and used the family computer to access social media, so her friendship with the Englishman was never a secret to her relatives. According to Ashley's mother, during their long-distance friendship, Jack had several relationships with different girls, and Ashley also had typical teenage experiences. Although there were periods when communication between the young people ceased, the connection never completely disappeared, and they continued to communicate for many years. As Ashley and Jack grew older, their relationship evolved. They began communicating not only through social networks, but also via video calls, making their relationship more intimate and romantic. Jack soon became a familiar face to Ashley's family members, who would usually greet him as if he were actually in their living room. Moreover, he frequently sent gifts to the girl, including teddy bears and handbags. Ashley's family and friends said that she always compared every boy she met to Jack. Due to the 8-hour time difference between Vernon and Essex, where Jack lived, the young couple often stayed up late or woke up early to talk. In 2018, when Ashley was 15, she began expressing interest in meeting Jack in person. However, her family did not allow her to travel alone to another continent. From time to time, the young couple argued like any other pair. When Ashley blocked Jack on her social networks during such disputes, he would create new accounts or send her messages through his sister or acquaintances. This behavior was troubling and intrusive to the girl's relatives, but she insisted that he was a compassionate and kind-hearted person. In October 2018, Jack had Ashley's name tattooed on his arm. She was 16 at the time, and he was 19. The girl's parents considered such a declaration of love excessive and warned her to be careful and not even think about doing the same. Soon after, during one of their arguments, Jack cut out his tattoo with Ashley's name using a knife. Afterward, he began to show himself as a jealous and cruel person. He became angry when he believed Ashley was going out with men, although he continued to date other girls himself. However, he insisted that Ashley was his favorite and said that he only needed her. One day, Ashley received a call from a girl who was at Jack's house, claiming he would not let her go. According to a friend who was present during this conversation, Ashley was not upset and even reacted as if she were used to such situations. She simply asked Jack to stop acting crazy. Ashley did not tell her parents about it, but she told her friends, who insisted that she end any contact with him. Despite numerous disputes and problematic behavior from the man, the couple always made peace. Ashley was only 18 years old and had known Jack since her early teens. She seemed unaware of the extent of his manipulation. From a young age, Ashley began working in fast food restaurants and department stores, saving money for entertainment. Her first major purchase was a tablet to use social media privately. Then she started saving for a trip to meet Jack in person. During her senior year of high school, Ashley, who had always been a very religious and curious person, experienced an epiphany after reading the Book of Mormon and began following the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated in 2020 from Sion High School and planned to study law at Thompson Rivers University, aiming to become a lawyer. However, She did not immediately enroll as classes were held via video conference due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Wanting to fully immerse herself in the university community, Ashley decided to take a break before continuing her studies. In the first half of 2021, she continued to work and save money, and in April of that year, she was baptized into Mormonism. At that time, Ashley, who had always been a bold and stubborn girl, decided to travel to the United Kingdom to meet Jack in person and celebrate his birthday with him. Her parents and friends were not pleased with the idea, but nothing could stop her since she had her own money and was of legal age. On November 12, 2021, Ashley traveled to the UK with a 6-month tourist visa. It was her first time leaving her homeland, and she was very excited about the trip. Ashley and Jack met for the first time in person on November 13, 2021. On the same day, Ashley changed her profile picture to a photo with him. Jack was already 22 years old and looked much older than Ashley. He was covered in tattoos, including on his face, and the contrast to the young, cheerful 19-year-old girl was stark. During her stay in London, Ashley lived in Jack's house. Since 2020, the young man had been living alone in an outbuilding of a public housing estate in northwest Chelsworth, an area with a dubious reputation. However, the couple explored the nicer parts of the city in Essex. Jack seemed to be the same person Ashley had met online. He was loving and caring, showered her with compliments, and never refused a romantic selfie. However, he was inconsistent and could be cruel. The couple was together every day. Ashley, who had a tourist visa, could not work and was unemployed. Jack received social benefits and occasionally got financial support from his mother, Tracy, who lived nearby. Ashley tried to constantly post photos and comments from the trip online. Most of the photos showed the couple cuddling, having fun, and enjoying romantic moments. Ashley kept in regular video contact with her family, and everything seemed to be going well. They even adopted a kitten, which they named Winston. Over time, however, Jack began to withdraw into himself. He no longer wanted to go out and sightsee, but preferred to stay home, smoke illegal substances, and play video games. Being in a foreign country, Ashley could hardly do anything on her own, though she loved being outdoors. Her options were limited by what Jack wanted to do. Before Ashley went to England, one of her church friends in America put her in touch with American missionaries who would be in Chelsworth at the same time as her. Ashley wanted to meet these young people who shared her religion and befriend them, but Jack would not allow her to go to church on Sundays. However, she stayed in contact with them via text messages. To prevent Jack from discovering this by looking at her phone, she deleted the messages. Her new church friends quickly realized that Jack was controlling her and possibly abusing her. When she spoke to them about her problems, she admitted that she knew she deserved better, but she just wanted Jack to be happy. The cruelty was not limited to controlling Ashley's interactions with other people. About 6 weeks after the girl's arrival, Jack texted his mother to tell her that he had hit Ashley because he had found out she had blocked 2 British numbers on her phone years earlier. He decided they belonged to other men, which triggered a fit of jealousy. Although Ashley continued to post photos of their seemingly perfect trip on her public social media, she created a secret profile where she began to show her bruises. Ashley did not hide the abuse from her sister Haley, but threatened to cut off communication if she told their mother, as she did not want her family to hate Jack. In late December 2021, Jack took an excessive number of anxiety pills. Ashley called an ambulance, which quickly took the man to the hospital, where he was treated for an overdose. Afterward, the girl was appointed as Jack's caretaker and took responsibility for the safe administration of his medications. Although Ashley did not tell his mother or his friends about this, Haley accidentally revealed the secret. Obviously, the mother was concerned and asked her daughter to return home, but Ashley insisted that Jack needed to get better first. In early January 2022, a new incident occurred. Jack broke a beer glass on Ashley's head. Sobbing, the girl contacted her sister via video call while the man forced her to clean up the shards. In the background, Haley saw Jack pacing back and forth, screaming and clenching his teeth. Haley pleaded with her sister to come home, but it was to no avail. On January 9th of the same year, Jack celebrated his 23rd birthday with his family and Ashley, as if nothing had happened. Shortly thereafter, Jack's mother and her husband organized a family outing to a small coastal town, concluding that a change of scenery might help reduce tensions. In the photos, everything looked so perfect that even Ashley's parents, who were unaware of the seriousness of the situation, breathed a sigh of relief when they saw their daughter's calm and happiness. However, the apparent tranquility soon disappeared. During an argument in late January, Jack hit Ashley again and threw a candle and a remote control at her while she was having a video chat with Haley, who once again pleaded with her sister to come home. Ashley initially agreed but soon backtracked. She believed that somewhere inside this cruel man was the same charming guy she had known for so many years. Ashley prayed that time and her love would heal the situation. According to conversations with his mother, Jack seemed to understand the cycle he had driven Ashley into. He accused her of infidelity, hit her, and then apologized. Although Jack appeared to feel guilty for his actions, it was not enough to prevent the tragedy that eventually occurred. On the morning of February 1st, 2022, Jack again became enraged at Ashley, accusing her of having run away and meeting other people behind his back. He even demanded to see her phone and check all her social networks. Shortly before 8 a.m., Helen Bortonshaw, Jack's neighbor, heard Ashley screaming through the shared wall, and a few minutes later, the woman appeared at the door. When the door opened, Helen saw a barefoot, tearful Ashley, bleeding from her palm. The victim explained that Jack had caught her looking at a photo of a naked woman and had become furious, insulting her, hitting her, then smashing her phone and throwing her kitten against the wall. Despite fears that Jack might kill her, Ashley begged Helen not to call the police. Helen agreed, but pleaded with Ashley to come with her to a doctor's appointment instead of returning to her partner's apartment. Ashley refused, and Helen decided to speak with Jack, who apologized for what had happened, remained calm, and then went to his appointment. At around 9 a.m., Lucy, another neighbor, brought Jack a package that had been mistakenly delivered to her address. He was reluctant to open the door, but Lucy didn't care, knowing he wasn't a friendly or paranoid person. Around the same time, Ashley called her family from Jack's phone. It was midnight in Vernon at that point. The girl's mother already knew what was happening with Jack because Haley could no longer bear it and had confessed everything. The parents immediately bought a return flight ticket for February 3rd. When Ashley told Jack that she would be leaving in 2 days, he agreed to accompany her to get the necessary COVID test for the trip and also said he would take her to the airport. Ashley's mother told her daughter to go directly to the airport if her boyfriend attacked her again and warned Jack that she would call the police if he hurt her daughter again. Ashley's conversation with her family lasted about 3 hours. When they finally hung up, it was 11 a.m. in Chelsworth and 3 a.m. in Vernon. A few minutes later, Jack texted his mother admitting that he had severely beaten Ashley again, thrown her to the ground, and possibly broken her arm. Between 11:20 a.m. and 12:30 p.m., Ashley sent several messages from Jack's phone to family and friends. Since it was night there, no one responded. She also wrote to her church friends in Chansford, asking for help and alerting them to her situation. Unfortunately, these messages were only received several hours later, when nothing could be done. Between 12:30 p.m. and 12:45 p.m., Jack attacked Ashley, strangling her until she stopped breathing. Then he went into the kitchen and took an 11 centimeters long knife, with which he stabbed her approximately 11 times in the chest and abdomen. After brutally ending his girlfriend's life, Jack went about his daily routine. Later, he changed his profile picture to one of himself with Ashley, which he captioned, "Forever Mine." He then recorded a video directed at Haley, stating that he loved Ashley, was very sorry but could not let her go, and that his mind was not working properly. The video, which was never sent, showed the girl's body beside him. While all this was happening in England, Ashley's family in Vernon woke up after seeing the number of messages Ashley had sent them. They called James Ashworth, one of their Mormon friends in Chelsworth. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another acquaintance from the church, went to Jack's apartment. After they knocked on the door and received no response, they called the police and waited. Meanwhile, Ashley's best friend, not realizing that the girl was no longer active on her social networks, texted her in desperation. On the other end was Jack, who pretended to be his deceased girlfriend. He told her friend that the messages were sent because she needed help with her COVID test, but that was no longer necessary. Messages from Ashley's family and friends kept coming, but Jack ignored them, and they all tried desperately to get news from her. Finally, Jack called his sister Nadia. When the girl answered, he admitted that he had killed Ashley, and even showed his sister the body. It was about 4:45 a.m. when the police, responding to Jamie's call, entered the apartment. Although it only took 10 minutes for them to arrive at the scene, it was already too late. The police immediately arrested Jack, who was covered in blood. The man told the officers that he was having a psychotic episode and admitted to the crime. He was then taken to the Chelsworth prison. The trial was scheduled for September 7, 2022, at the Chelsworth Crown Court. Toxicological tests showed that Jack had only traces of mild controlled substances and a small amount of anti-anxiety medication. Furthermore, according to the results of a psychiatric evaluation, the defendant was able to make statements and stand trial. The evidence against Jack was overwhelming and included a video recording in which he admitted to the crime. The man pleaded guilty immediately, and the judge informed him that only one sentence could be imposed: life imprisonment. On the day of the hearing before Judge Edward Murray at the Chelsworth Crown Court, prosecutor Simon Spence detailed Jack's criminal history as a teenager. At that time, Ashley's parents first learned who their daughter's true friend was. Jack had been in trouble with the law since 2014, having been arrested multiple times for stalking a girl, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and violent assault. He had also been issued several restraining orders against his mother and girlfriend. Ashley's parents were shocked when they learned of the criminal history of the man who took their daughter's life. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense exchanged views on a letter Jack had sent from prison to Ashley's family, in which he expressed his remorse for his actions. After the hearing, Judge Murray allowed the letter to be published in the media, citing the principle of open justice. In the letter to Ashley's entire family, especially her mother and sister Haley, he stated that he knew nothing he said or did could bring Ashley back or relieve them of the pain they were experiencing. Jack regretted his actions and mentioned that they knew about his mental health because he had openly talked about it with Ashley. He added that his condition had deteriorated quickly, and that while this was no excuse, the intrusive thoughts had a significant impact on his thinking and actions. Given the long history of violent acts presented by the prosecutor and his admission of guilt, Jack was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years.